Welcome back. Time to seek some views on the news now. And our special guest today is Matt Driskill, senior editor at Reuters News. Thanks for joining us today on the show, Matt. Always good to have you here. Let's take a look at our first story. This one's from the South China Morning Post. Barristers in Hong Kong have hit out at Beijing's white paper and vowed to protect judicial independence. It says while courts elsewhere might sing in unison with the government, that was not the case in Hong Kong. Quoting Beijing's white paper, the Washington Post writes Hong Kong's high degree of autonomy is subject to the central government's authorization and that the principle of two systems is subordinate to the idea of one country, raising fears over civil liberties in the special administrative region. So, Matt, is this a case of Beijing showing Hong Kong who's really in charge?
Absolutely. And anybody that thinks that Beijing is not in charge or that has not been calling the shots in Hong Kong for a long time, I would say even before the handover in 1997, they're naive at best. And as we were talking just before we came on the air, I love this story because it's the story that keeps on giving. Now, I moved to Hong Kong in 1997 just after the handover, and I was at the Foreign Correspondents Club, bending my elbow a little bit and talking to some people there. And this photographer, who shall remain nameless, said, well, you've missed the story. You're too late. And I looked at him and I said, well, you know, I really think the story is just now starting, because it's one thing to want Hong Kong and it's another thing to figure out what you're going to do with it when you have it. And the only thing that I'm really surprised about is because Beijing tends to play the long game, I'm a bit surprised that these kinds of things are happening now, but I think probably the election in the next chief executive election in 2017, I believe it is forcing their hand a little bit.
It makes a mockery of this promise for universal suffrage as well, doesn't it?
Mockery, yes, but again, it's, you know, Beijing does not, they want to call the shots. Hong Kong is their territory. They own it now. And if they want to, if their mandate is that you must love Hong Kong or love China in order to run for chief executive, then that's what they're going to do. And the thing is, it's, you know, we can sit here and debate this till the cows come home, as we say in Oklahoma, but what is anybody going to do about it? There was a famous presenter, again at the FCC, Foreign Correspondents Club in Hong Kong, a BBC presenter who was coming through town, and I think I was president of the club at the time, and so I was hosting him and all of this. And he started raising some of these same points, that China was, you know, taking over. They had promised 50 years of basic hands-off policy. And I said, yeah, but what are you going to do about it? And he says, well, don't you think we should report it? I said, absolutely report it. It is the story. But do you honestly think that the British are going to come back and take Hong Kong back from the Chinese? Do you think that the United States is going to step in and do something? China's calling the shots.
I thought it was really interesting, especially with the recent anniversary of the Tiananmen Square incident, that China had done a lot to kind of control the messaging out there on that. But Hong Kong actually hosted the world's biggest vigil on that event. So was that a sense of kind of that them asserting the fact that they're still in charge, but not doing things about that type of event in Hong Kong?
Well, you know, they're not going to come in and they're not going to send the troops in to clear out everybody from Victoria Park, the 10,000 or 20,000 people who were there. They're not going to do that. And you know, I think if they learned a few lessons from Tiananmen Square. Having said that, the potential for Hong Kong to become a flashpoint, for something to happen akin to or similar to what happened in Tiananmen Square, that possibility I rank very high. Not because they're going to intentionally do something, but because accidents happen. They're going to have a protest with 500,000 people. Tempers are going to flare. A policeman's going to get pushed the wrong way. Somebody gets hurt. And these things just spiral out of control, and then someone in Beijing says, okay, that's it, call in the troops, we're not going to put up with this anymore. I don't, you know, is that going to happen tomorrow? No. Is the potential there? Absolutely, I think it is. Absolutely. And I just, let me just interrupt just one thing, because when I was, and thank you for picking this story, by the way, this morning, because there was actually, this was sort of alluded to back in 2012, when a retiring judge from the Hong Kong's Court of Final Appeal said that there was a, quote, storm of unprecedented ferocity gathering over the rule of law in Hong Kong. And this was a year ago when he was retiring, basically forced to retire. He'd reached retirement age, but it was not unprecedented for judges to continue serving. And this was Kamal Bokhari, actually.
Since after 1997, when you were there and you were with the FCC, what's your assessment of how press and judicial freedom has evolved since then?
Well, it's eroded quite a bit, I think. It's not so much that you have the censors from Beijing, like they have at Xinhua, sitting in the Hong Kong newsrooms, but when you face the threat, the very real threat, the very proven threat of being attacked, I forget the editor's name, but
the editor Ming Pao.
Ming Pao, who was almost died. He was slashed, hacked, and almost died. When you face that very real threat that what you report on could cost you your life, you do tend to self-censor, and that's been going on very much. And I think it's not overstating the case. I think, one, we really have to keep an eye on the rule of law in Hong Kong because that is the bedrock of that city. And without the rule of law, it's nothing.
Okay, well, let's move on to our next story. We can talk about that for a long time. This from a Wall Street Journal microblog, relationship based on more than disputes, Aquino tells Beijing. And that story referring to comments made by President Benigno Aquino and Chinese Ambassador Zhao Jinhua at the recent annual Filipino-Chinese Friendship Day in Manila, essentially pointing to the economic relationship that the countries have had for more than 1,000 years, essentially. You know, we've been talking a lot this morning about the territorial disputes, the war of words with Japan, China, Vietnam, everyone just, playing on this angst in this region. But this one, a bit of a departure, really kind of maybe throwing the focus back on money is really what talks, and maybe kind of using diplomacy as a way of building friendly ties?
Well, I was trying to come up with that when I was looking at the articles this morning before I came in, and the money talks is exactly what it's all about. Whether we're talking about, Crimea or China or South China Sea or Vietnam or the United States or Europe, money is what makes the world go round.
Second largest economy. How can you ignore?
Second largest economy, second country with the second highest number of millionaires, and we'll probably soon overtake the U.S. Fairly soon. But of course, money talks. I have a feeling this dinner was kind of boring.
Everyone, the press was probably looking for some angry words.
But if there were an economic resolution to the territorial disputes, surely that's a lot better than clashes in the South China Sea.
Absolutely. Nobody wants to see people get killed over these things. And I think that has been on the table, that has been offered to go to the United Nations to say, okay, we've got China, we've got the Philippines, we've got Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei, all these other countries that have a say in the South China Sea. Let's sit down, let's divvy it up. I mean, what could be more fair than that? Instead of China trying to take the whole thing, divvy it up on a pro rata basis, and everybody go on down the road and be happy together. And that would be, the best thing in the world for everybody concerned. Nobody wants to go to war over this.
Obviously, the resources there, the oil rig, everyone, the natural resources is what they're talking about too. But do you think there's a solution to try to share that? I mean, there is a lot still to be discovered. Who gets to dig it up? Who gets to find it? I guess that's the question.
Again, we go back to the term money talks. And money is, Gordon Gekko in the movie Wall Street said greed is good. When people find out that there's gold in them thar hills, then they get greedy and they want to take everything over. So the incentive to share, especially when you've got a big Navy and you're developing aircraft carrier capabilities, the incentive to share becomes less and less. So the more natural resources they find there, the less incentive that they're going to have to share them, because they're going to want it all. Because they do have the second largest economy. and they need to fund that, and they need to grow that, and they need the natural resources for that.
Okay.
So,
well, from money talks to teacher talks, this one for parents out there. 10 things teachers want to say to parents but can't. That is an article in The Guardian. It's written by one primary teacher. Now, Matt, there are several tips here for parents from this teacher. One of them is your kids are not your mates. Teachers want to say that to parents but can't. Often this teacher gets people saying, my daughter or my son is my best friend. Why would this ring alarm bells?
I agree with 99% of what this teacher's saying. My mother told me a long time ago, I'm not your friend. I'm your mother. You listen to me, you respect me, you do what I say, and don't talk back and get on with things.
And that's still the case now.
And that's still the case now. That is very, very much true. And like I said, I agree with 99% of these. You know, the data levels aren't everything. So give somebody time to settle in, new children, new teachers. We had some of that same problem with my own son when we moved to Singapore. Teachers were raising concerns. I said, look, he's a new kid, it's a new school, new city. Everybody calm down. Let them go a little bit. Absolutely. You've got, you know.
I like the PE as compulsory.
PE
a lot of parents, I feel, maybe think they can sit it out because they have asthma or they have, you know, these kinds of things I used to see.
I like this one. Sorry, your kid's just lazy.
Yeah, your kid's just lazy.
I mean,
but on the PE side,
I don't know if I agree with that statement, though. I have to say maybe I don't agree about
I think some
laziness.
teachers are also quite happy to tell parents that their kids are lazy. They don't necessarily
Maybe they
shy
just
away
need
from that point.
Yeah, well, maybe they just needed some inspiration in a different way.
Yeah.
So I don't agree with that one.
What do you make of these, Matt? I mean, you agree with most of these, but do you think that teachers should actually be telling parents?
absolutely, and parents need to understand it. I mean, the world has changed a lot. You know, my parents, when I was growing up, they didn't expect the teacher to have all the answers. And you cannot today expect a teacher to have all the answers for a class of 20, 25, 30 kids, 40 kids in the United States in some classes. And, you know, I listen to the teachers for 99% of the time. When I know my son is right though and the teacher's wrong, I do not hesitate to speak up. But I also don't blame the teachers for everything. They've got a tough job to do. 99% of them are trying to do the best job they can, and I think parents too often shove the responsibility onto the teachers rather than taking it on themselves.
Well, they are all PR experts, parental experts there as well. So anyway, that is all that we've got time for this morning, Matt. Thanks for joining us today, and good to get your thoughts on those articles. Matt Driskill from Reuters News there. Time for a break, but coming up on First Occasion, join us as we look at what happened on Wall Street overnight and get a preview of Asian trade.